as Kristen also mentioned, there's a $400 expense anticipated. And in general, towns and citizenry and the state are wanting the police department to be trained more regularly. And I think it would clarify, if we have a line called training, it would clarify to us when we are anticipating somebody being trained. We know where we would find that money and we would put that money there. And it would show to the citizens that we are taking training seriously. And I think it's a good idea to list it as a separate thing and to pay attention. And if it's a rollover, we could talk about whether it has that feature, but I think regardless of how the Bridge Academy works out or not, I think it's a good idea.
Kristen.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. As Becky stated, I did have a meeting, an all chiefs in Massachusetts meeting today. It was pretty lengthy. We reviewed the reform bill and what is going to be coming of that with the post system, which there are going to be some amazing things that are coming from that. I am a huge proponent for trainings. I think that there are a lot of fantastic trainings out there for officers. And the other night, I'm not sure if you all saw, but we collaborated with the fire department working on our own interdepartmental training with the fire department and the police department, sort of creating our own training area. That being said, it has been in the forefront of my mind that a sort of training budget would be appropriate. With the post system coming into play, we're learning more of the specified requirements for trainings that all officers in the Commonwealth must partake in. We're going to find out what the Commonwealth is going to offer us, what grants are going to be available, but also what we are going to be required to do moving forward. So I think that it would be behoove us to do a training line budget. That being said, right now, I don't have an exact number of what's going to be required in the future, although that is evolving very quickly for us. The chiefs are meeting just about weekly at this point. So there's some good news on the horizon with that, but also some ideas that I have and that I'd like to see a training line budget so the officers can be the best trained, especially considering they're looking really for de-escalation, behavioral trainings, and things like that.
Bob.
Yeah, I just want to say, Kristen, you weren't around for this, but I remember this, and maybe some other members of this committee remember this. But when Chief Fernandez came to us 2 years ago, I guess it was, he increased the line for the operating expenses. And the reason he did that was to include more training for his officers. So I'm concerned about cost. Naturally, that's what I'm doing here. And I just want to be sure we understand that we did increase that line to cover additional cost of training. And if we're going to create another line for training, then we have to adjust the line for operating expenses accordingly and study that. Yes, you might have additional requirements legally that might cost us more money, and certainly that's something we have to address. But I just want to make the point about the operating budget, including training. That was the way it was pitched, and I'm sure that others might recall that as well as I do.
Becky, and then Kristen.
The expense line has not been increased for at least 6 years. So I do not recall what you're describing, Bob, but I know for a fact that the $19,000 has been the amount in the expense line for a number of years. And
Kristen, I'm sorry, Becky. I'm sorry, Becky.
That's okay.
Okay, Kristen.
Yes, that was actually my question. How much was it increased to? Thank you, Becky. Again, I've really only been working on this for about 3 weeks, so I still have a lot of questions myself, but thank you, Becky.
I guess for me, just a clarification. I'm just thinking of where we left this topic a couple of weeks ago. And my recollection was that it's sort of a moot point. Really, the issue was when we wrapped up this discussion a couple of weeks ago, was let's relook at what we have spent so far in this operating line year to date or fiscal year to date, and then look at the remaining 2 or 3 months and see what we need to spend. And based on where we were a couple of weeks ago, we're on track to use that whole budget up. So if that's the case, and that's still the case today, based on the homework and the work that Kristen has done, isn't really the discussion for this item about, okay, if we're going to use up that line on the routine operating expenses as we have over the last number of years, isn't really this discussion whether we want to approve an additional 3,000 for this training or not. I guess it seems to me we're talking about a lot of other things other than whether it's appropriate to spend this $3,000 out of the reserve.
Jim, may I, for my recollection was, we were talking about $3,000 for Christian's training last meeting.
No, no.
No,
No, Bob. This is for the training that's already been done.
Mark,
Okay, I was
This
mistaken
topic
about that.
Is for training that's already been done.
for Marcus.
Susie,
So, I guess the label we put on this, we could call it, transferring 3,000 for, the training that Marcus got. I guess that's how we could call it, but also there's, right now, that's been paid, so the bills that are left are operating expenses.
Is that the right number? The 3,000? Is that, Kristen?
that's
that's
the
what we're talking
tuition
about.
number, yes.
But is it the right number in terms of what's needed to pay out our? I mean, I know that you said we, at least as of now, we're running $1,300 over, but it sounded like there's some other things coming up. So I just want to make sure we're talking about the right number in terms of what the fund request is.
Those numbers added up to 2,000 when she finished talking. So if we
Got it.
transferred the 3,000, it should be able to meet the needs. But
Okay.
like she said, again, she hasn't learned to anticipate all of them.
Yeah.
So 3,000 would be a good idea.
yeah, but if you look at what we have spent so far out of this line, we're right on track to meet the budget without the 3,000 for the training.
But I thought you said that there's only $4,000 left in the budget, and there's $5,300 of current outstanding bills.
Yes, that's
You
what
adjusted it.
she said. So there's $2,069 left for her to manage for the rest of the year.
Right.
No, I'm sorry. There's $931. I did it backwards. I apologize. She has $2,069 is what she needs to pay out that she doesn't have right now. So if she's given $3,000 more, she'll have $931 left to manage the rest of the year.
Are we ready for a motion?
I make a motion that we transfer $3,000 to the police operating budget for unanticipated training costs and to finish out the end of the year.
Second,
Any further discussion? Kristen, did you want to say
Thank
something
you.
or you just,
Thank you very much.
We
oh,
got-
no, we haven't voted yet. Welcome to your first FinCom meeting. Okay, no further discussion?
Right.
Okay, can we go ahead with a vote?
Gavinitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosher, aye.
Walton, aye.
Now you can thank us.
Now you,
You try that again, Kristen?
Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your patience in this matter. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for putting that work together, Kristen. and preparing and presenting.
I
Much-
will.
Much
I will
appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll continue to do my absolute best to keep everything tight and in order.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay. Do we want to get to review minutes from last meeting,
Yes.
which we all have? Has everyone had a chance to take a look? And if so, comments?
Yes.
Jim?
AJ, could on the debt service has increased line, it's about 5 notches down. Could you
Yep.
change MBI to the last portion of the state broadband construction grant? It
Okay.
just clarifies it a little bit better.
So that line about anticipating using the $25,000, is that the right
Yes,
spot?
yes.
Yeah, okay. So could you say that one more time for me?
Okay, it's change MBI to
Yep.
the last portion of the state broadband construction grant.
Okay, thanks.
And I also have some other.
Go ahead.
Let's see, let me scroll away here. The money that we're getting, this is 3 notches down on item 4. Becky, I'm under the impression that we're not getting $350,000, but we're getting precisely $173,000. Is that the case? Because I looked it up on the internet.
I have no clue where you found that number, Jim.
Well,
It's
there's
not the amount of money that was allocated to the town of Shutesbury. It was 100, if you're talking about CARES money, it was about 156,000.
well, I'm talking about the
So-
ARA money.
This is about the American Rescue.
And the
So
American
I
Rescue-
just, I'm sorry, just the bracketed note there comes from a document that Bob shared. I think it was a Boston Globe article that included a chart that specified the amounts that each town would be receiving. So
Mhm.
that new number of 513,000 came from that article. Did I misread that?
No,
Bob
you
or
didn't.
Becky?
The
Okay.
513 is in fact what was allocated to Shutesbury.
Okay,
But in the case of
got it.
Shutesbury and all other towns in Franklin County, FERCog gets most of it, and what's left over is 173,000 for us. And this comes from a table
see.
that I looked up online that goes into county by county and town by town. And what I'm puzzled by in trying to understand this is that some counties like Franklin County, a lot of the money goes to FERCog, and then we get a certain portion of it for our own, needs and uses that follow the act. But for some reason, there are a couple of counties, namely Barnstable and Bristol County, where they get the whole tamale. And I don't understand what there is about the way counties and the towns within the counties work on this order. I don't know, maybe someone has an answer to this question, but I was very puzzled by that. Yeah.
Again, getting back to the minutes, I think this paragraph.
It's probably not appropriate because this is not a minutes issue, but
Right.
Yeah.
but
But yeah,
350
but this paragraph, at least the way I interpret it, is very consistent with the way the discussion went during.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not, I guess I'm sort of branching off the topic, but I do know that the ACA money that we're going to get is 173,000. That I'm sure of. It's not 350, which is unfortunate, but what can you do? So.
Bob,
AJ, I want to ask you a question because I'm a little
Yeah.
confused about this, and maybe you can help
Sure.
me understand it, or maybe it needs to be changed. But on the bullet point below that,
Yeah.
we talked. You and I. You made a statement about the budgeting process, the 65% statutory
Right.
solution and how it might have been connected to cutting the budget. And so even though it was $21,000, which was a relatively small amount, that it showed the relationship between our drive for equity and impact on the budget. And I think that's reflected in your statement. What I don't
Right.
understand, looking at the budget that was presented in December and the one that we ended up with recently in March, it seems to me that two things happened that I take out of those numbers. One, that Shutesbury's assessment went down markedly, but at the same time, the assessment for the whole region went up and the budget went up. From the original deal that was offered to us at the original projected numbers, our efforts, I think, resulted in an increase in spending on education in the region and a reduction in our assessment. And I think I tried to say that counter to what you said at the meeting. I don't see that that's not true. Am I wrong about that?
Well, just to respond quick, I mean, my comment was limited to the last phase of this process, where there were two subsequent meetings that the regional school committee held, a budget hearing, and then a next meeting where they they voted on the budget figure and assessment that passed. And so at the budget hearing meeting, there were two, I think, as I tried to state in the notes here, there were two budgets presented as options for the committee to consider. And the difference between those two budgets was one employed the 65% method and the other employed the 55% method. But again, Amherst assessment was fixed at an amount that's the same amount in both those two budgets, and that was based on the town council's decision, I guess, after reviewing some the condition of the town, that they were prepared to go from a 1.5% increase in their assessment to a 2.1% increase, but not a dollar over that. And so my point was really limited to just that phase of the process, where once Amherst's budget or assessment was determined about what it could be, they had a choice in terms of setting the assessment. And to get to the 65% method, it meant reducing the overall operating budget by $21,000. So I think I think it sounds like you're talking about sort of changes in the budget from earlier budgets that were presented maybe at the Four Towns meeting, and sort of changes that you've seen that happened between that point and the final budget that was passed. But that wasn't really what I was commenting on. I was commenting on once it was determined what Amherst's assessment was going to be, there was a decision about which assessment method to apply, and that assessment method had an impact on the overall budget. And again, my point in bringing this up last week was more to just I think it's important context for us in the future because at times when we've talked about the possibility that the region's budget might have to be reduced to accommodate our need for a specific assessment method, or more favorable assessment method for our town, that has been in some I think voices in this committee dismissed as unlikely to happen. And I think I'm just raising it as, here's an illustration where on a small level it certainly did happen, and I just want us to be mindful of that in the future as a potential consequence. So that was really the only issue I was speaking to.
Okay, I would like to respectfully request that my response to your remarks, which I think your remarks are expressed well in your minutes.
Okay.
I just think that I also said something that ultimately the budget went up and our assessment went down, which were two things which we did predict would happen. And we were right about that, those of us who supported 65%. So I'd like to have that included in the minutes if that's okay.
yeah, I'm gonna add basically that sentence. Bob Groves responds that ultimately the regional school budget increased while Shutesbury's assessment decreased. That's fair.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Susie,
On page 1, the dot, the last dot on the page, when there was a discussion with Gail Huntress about whether we had we did not have the capacity to assess income eligibility. But the last part of that discussion included how Becky had worked out some support for families. And so I think we could put that in there.
And that was using CARES Act
Yeah.
funds? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
George,
A minor point on number 4, the second bullet. Peter Demling, he wasn't in our meeting, so he didn't state it in our meeting. Where did we get that information from? Was that reported from Steve, and should it be in number,
That was me giving a recap of the budget hearing where this was discussed. So maybe I should make that clear.
Yeah, just a qualification. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I have no further amendments.
okay, I don't have a change to the minutes, but there is under 4, the third from last bullet on 4, where it says Susie Mosier states the regional, I don't know,
Mhm.
About minimum contribution and enrollment factors. To me, that seems like that would be valuable information for all of us to see. Does somebody have a copy of that we,
I can send it out.
Susie has it.
yeah. 'Cause I think that would be good stuff for all of us.
Okay.
Any other? Bob?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes as amended?
I'll second it.
Okay, if we can take a vote.
Urbanite, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye.
Good.
Okay, 2 items down.
A roll.
We're on a roll tonight.
That color on your plaster, it's really nice.
Pretty wild in there, huh?
I can tell.
Is that coming from my eyes or coming from? Oh, my. Fiscal year 22 revenue and expense projections. And Becky, I think you sent us another update this afternoon on this. You're on mute.
I had to send another one because the first one did not have the attachments, and luckily Bob let me know. So you should have an email with attachments of the revenue, expense, and revenue. I mean, yeah, the budget with expense and revenue in your. And I would ask Jim, maybe you could put it up on the screen if I give you co-host.
Okay. Do you want me to, which one? Do you want me to do revenue or expense?
It's your guys' choice.
Well, the first question I'd have is there any changes in revenue?
No,
Okay, if there's no changes in revenue, does anyone have a need to relook at revenue? Okay, so let's look at expense.
Somehow I didn't get the later email. I don't know why.
Jim, did anybody else not get the I don't know how it could be just Susie.
I got it.
Yep, I have it.
Susie,
Okay,
725.
just lucky, I guess.
Yeah,
Susie,
it's
it's your
good.
Verizon email address is the one
Yeah.
on there? Is that the right one? Yeah.
Yep, you're on there. It was 7:25.
Oh, okay, maybe that's what happened.
Very recent.
Yeah,
Very
'cause
fresh.
it was
Right.
already recent, then I had to resend after Bob let me know.
Okay, good.
Very fresh.
Very fresh.
And while everybody's getting organized, I want to mention that I found the official Mass Municipal listing of American Rescue Plan Act with the breakouts. The numbers you guys were quoting are correct. But what is wonderful in this report is there's a column D that refers to money allocated per capita by county allocation. And then if you go over to F, the column says abolish county, funding automatically transferred to the municipality.
Ooh,
Franklin County is abolished.
Right.
So the 340,177 is being transferred to the municipality. So the full amount is 513,727. I'm sorry, 513,219.
Right.
Great.
The original amount.
That's awesome.
what are we gonna do with all that money?
Well, it's for a number of years. It's not just 1 year. So we need to do some planning.
Yeah.
We got some roofing, right?
I don't know if that's technically.
That's
the
a little
COVID out of the
harder
building.
Quality, I
to do
suppose.
than the HVAC system.
Yeah, that's to keep the
Hmm.
COVID out of the building.
The
Becky, what
COVID
period-
monster?
Becky, you said it's for more than 1 year. Roughly how many years would is this supposed to?
I think what I've read, it's like 2 years, 2.5 years.
Good. That's good.
2024, I think.
And is there a document that outlines what the allowable expenses are, like that?
I
makes
have
it
not
clear?
yet seen that, but I will search for that. That's what I've been waiting for. I thought we were gonna
Yeah.
have one of the governor's sessions, but it has not yet occurred. So I think hopefully, yeah, we should have one soon, but I do not have my hands on it yet.
Becky and group, I talked to Alina at Joe Comerford's office about this, and she said that generally speaking, HVAC and air quality improvements, augmentations will be supported by the act, and we'll be able to dip into that to some degree.
Yeah.
She said there's more specific. She gave me a link, which I'll send to everybody, that describes some of some protocols that are going to be used, that they understand, her office understands as of now. So it's going to help us with the school quite a bit, and probably with town hall too, because air quality is a big issue for COVID hygiene. So it's gonna, there's got beyond what we're contemplating now, which are basically controls for the heating ventilation system that exists. We can look at ways to improve air quality further by having an air exchange, high tech, sort of modern air exchange system that would also make the air healthier and fresher, and for the students and for all of staff. And I think that would also fall under the auspices of this act. So it's good stuff, and stuff that would be useful beyond the pandemic for the school.
I think having attended some of the school meetings, I do know that their air quality numbers were right in line where they needed to be already, Bob.
Yeah, exactly. But as I talked to Jamrock too about
Yeah.
this, he said basically what they're doing, which was a fine thing to do, but not very efficient, was just pumping fresh air into the building without preheating it. It was a kind of a crude but effective way to improve air quality by getting a lot of fresh air into the building, but it was costly because we lost a lot of heat, and we didn't have the
Oh,
kind of
before.
controls that might have made it more precise, So anyway, it was good that they did it. They did it with the existing equipment, but in the future we can improve that, and
Great.
we'll be able to hopefully dip into federal and state support to do it. So good.
And I'm also working on potentially green communities money to support as well.
Excellent.
If it's needed. And just so you're all aware, we did install an air exchanger in town hall last August. So there's the downstairs has the benefit of a full air exchanger that was put in before the elections that allowed us to have the elections in town hall. But the upstairs is problematic with all the rooms split into their own, except for the two larger rooms. There's a lot of small zones upstairs that trying to replicate that air exchanging system is much more costly up here.
Yeah, with a radiation heating system, yeah.
Yeah.
You need an open floor plan there, Becky.
Well, now that I just got my walls put back up, you want to tear them down. I get it.
Can everybody see the Becky's expense
Yep.
Yes,
document okay?
Yeah.
It's big enough?
yes.
Okay.
So far, looks pretty good.
Okay, so the biggest change was I put in the new regional figure at 65% of 1,611,136. I believe that is the final number. The other changes for this week, I'm sorry. I put in the longevity. There were 2 items.
Well, that would be this right here. Is this?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you said you have added, okay, that's what, okay, got it. Never mind. Yeah.
okay. So I put in longevity for the accountant and highway. So the highway, sorry, I'm just making sure I give you the right numbers. I think they were both 300, but one was, I think the accountant is 375 and the highway is 300. No, 500. Steve Sullivan's 500. He hit 10 years.
So
Becky,
Yeah,
can I ask you a question on the police budget?
Yeah.
Kristen is our, what's her title again? Officer in
She-
charge?
yes,
Did she get a cruiser as part of that?
yes,
She
because
drive home- she drives
she
to
has
Dalton every day?
responsibility. I'm sorry.
She drives to Dalton and back every day?
No, she doesn't live in Dalton.
Oh, I thought she lived in Dalton.
No,
I hope not.
She
I
lives
thought she
in-
had a 100-mile round trip to work, so.
no. She worked in Hinsdale 10 years ago, but no, she doesn't live in Dalton. She lives in Ludlow.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm just concerned that, and I'm not picking on her at all because we already had a chief that lived in
Wilbraham.
Wilbraham. That this cruiser, he requested the cruiser to be replaced and a lot of the miles are on commute. Doesn't that seem like something we should be thinking about as maybe something we could change?
Well, I think it's having a police chief who is responsible to, respond in emergencies is a critical service to the community. So you're welcome to talk about it. She is driving the least expensive, oldest vehicle outside of the Crown Vic. That, as you said, was the one that was Dan had recommended for replacing. But gets the best mileage, better mileage than the 2 SUVs. And it's important to have this person available at all times and support the fire department in other, really big emergencies too. So I think that's probably one of those policy issues that is, the select
I
board
agree.
will weigh in,
I just think that it's also got financial implications and we should be aware of it. That's all.
as do most policy issues. Yep.
Hey, AJ,
I was just gonna ask if that was a pretty standard practice among towns. Do we, if we're gonna spend time looking into that issue or discussing it, it seems like it'd be worth.
It is a
researching.
standard practice, and even Wendell, who had a 5 to 10 hour a month or a week police chief, had a cruiser for their chief.
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely standard practice, and you can see the necessity and logic of it. And it's typical when a chief would be on vacation that the person that would be the officer in charge would take the cruiser home because the responsibilities don't stop. They're on call 24 hours when they're have that responsibility.
Did the personnel board come to a conclusion about what would be recommended for raises, cost of living raises?
They have a proposal. I'm sure George could outline, but they haven't presented to the select board yet. That's going to happen at the next select board meeting.
Oh, when is that, Becky?
That is the 13th.
So this budget doesn't include any increases for wages?
Correct.
Yeah, maybe to that point, Becky, what other types of items do you anticipate that will change this?
I guess we have, I don't know if any of the contracts will impact it. So potentially we have unresolved 3 contracts. I don't know if it may or may not have any impact on this budget. There
Treasurer?
are, I'm sorry, George.
Treasurer?
And we have, no, because it's for FY22.
Oh, well, isn't that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so,
The treasurer, there's another change that the treasurer, once the select board signs off on his new PAF, it's been recommended that his hours increase 2.5 hours a week.
so,
PAF means, just for all of us?
Personal action form.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
It's been
if I may,
Yes.
on the personnel board side, so Becky was saying 1% is $6,700. So if it's 2%, if our recommendation comes out to 2%, which I think it might even be lower, we're looking at about 13.4, right? Increase there. And then the treasurer adjustment, we're looking at about $15,000 to $16,000 additional amount in this budget, as just to throw out an estimate at the high end. So just so everybody knows, when we're looking at the bottom line, you want to figure there's another 16,000 expenses. Does that sound about right, Becky?
I think it was like 3,000 and something, so it'll be a little closer to 16.5.
Okay. Okay.
But that doesn't, and then in addition to that, there's also the contracts, right? That they could potentially change.
Yep.
So there's roughly 16 plus or minus, plus wherever these 3 contracts that are still, those are open issues.
Yep.
3 contracts.
May I ask, what are those again? Police, school?
Yeah.
Well, the school is not going to impact the budget because they have they already budgeted for the raise in their budget. But the police, highway superintendent, and town administrator.
And has the highway superintendent announced when he's retiring?
He said he would give us another year, which places him through
September of
the
2020.
full FY22 and another 3 months through September.
Thanks.
And
What age is Tim, do you know? Offhand?
So say it again?
How old is, right, Tim?
I can just tell you he's older than me.
Well, that's it, everybody, come on.
He's a youngster.
He's not much older than me though. And our birthdays are 1 day apart.
Wow, is this the day before or the day after?
The day before.
Ah, that's funny. There's three of us, 24, 25, 26. That's
You're
so
the
funny.
day after, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's right. That's how I can remember yours, Becky.
I was wondering. That's pretty good, George. I'm sorry, I forgot.
That's all right. The 25th is also Greek Independence Day for everybody's
All right.
That's a big,
historical perspective. How many years ago was that?
Which independence?
Yeah, right. Good question.
So I have some line items and expenses that I wanted to check out. Are we ready to look at some of those?
Yeah, I want to make sure we close the loop with Becky. And Becky, in addition to those items you just spelled out, is there anything else significant that you think could impact the expense side?
let me just look here.
That's not in there right now?
Regional assess, oh, I changed the emergency notifications, added $500. I'm sorry. The emergency notification system is $1,500 and the old one was 2,000. So there's a $500 savings there. And the last big one that I put in, the health insurance line, which is near the end, Jim, under miscellaneous. You'll see the health insurance line had been recommended by Ryan at $530,000. But when we learn more from the Hampshire County Trust, our health insurance provider, we will be receiving a 2% discount on our premiums this year, which is $10,000. So I reduced the 530 down to 520 because of the 2% reduction. And hopefully that will still take into account the other concerns Ryan had, but that's why I made that change. Because when he made that estimate, we did not know that.
And what's the line below that, the Hamp Trust employee copay account?
Okay, so we negotiated with the school union, police union, and town employees, I think in FY18, to the Hampshire County Trust was going to include, raise our premiums by, I think it was 5 or 6%. And they were going to include the removal of the copays for 3 different items were added that we didn't have copays before that period of time. And so we negotiated with our unions that if they in fact had those need of those copay services, it was imaging, and there were 3 categories with the copays, and one was like imaging, getting scans, and those things, that we would pay the $200 or $100 fee out of this account. So this was negotiated with the unions and the account was set up, and it's been clear that we have not been getting close. Like you can see the actual, it was FY20, it went into effect. But the actual amount we had spent the prior year, in FY20, was only $100. Business has been picking up. I've had to send Ryan the new copies of information about the copay program, and there have been probably at least $1,000 worth this year, but it still seemed reasonable to reduce that amount, which was part of the policy when it was enacted, that the town would provide for that copay situation, and we would look and see how much it was being used and adjust our budget accordingly. So that
Yep.
was,
I'm sorry, Becky.
Jim,
Yeah, yes.
I have to leave at this time, but I want to wish you all well. I'll see you our next meeting.
Okay.
Jim?
Thank you.
take
Take care,
care, Jim.
Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Bye.
So is that account a rollover account? Is that money
Yes.
accumulating? Okay, good.
Yes.
So this copay situation still exists exactly the same way it did. Those copays are not covered by the plan. Okay.
But it kept us from, a 5% increase would have been like $25,000. So a year ongoing. So this was more cost effective to do it this way.
It's also an anomalous year. Nobody got any health care this year.
Well, that's what's odd, that we're getting more use of the program. So
Surprised that we didn't get bigger cut in our health insurance premiums, to say the truth.
well, I'm glad we got something, considering we haven't had an increase in 4 years. Being
Yeah,
able
that's
to go down is positive.
Yep.
Yeah, so Becky, what I see, just summarizing here, it looks like right now the revenues are running about 54,000, 55,000 above expenses. And some chunk of that will be taken away with COLA and the items we just talked about,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, more likely to be 71,000.
Say that again, George?
Well, Becky was saying it will be about 16,500, right? So that'll put us up to about 71,000.
No, that would go in the other
Other
direction.
way.
It
It's
goes in the
going that
opposite
way.
direction, George.
We have a surplus
Oh,
right
I'm
now.
looking at the, oh, yeah, okay. Yep, got it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank God.
I know. I thought I was looking at expenses, but I see the revenue in there.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, there is one likely change going to happen to revenue once we get updated numbers on the overall levy.
Do you want me to show revenue,
Sure.
Becky?
And we talked about this last time, but the total assessed value of the town right now is sitting at the same number as FY21. And the guidance I got from DOR is to work closely with our assessor and review, I think it's the LA 4 or the form, the factors there. It might be the LA 18, one of the recap sheets, and determine if the total assessed value of the town is understated in what we're presenting here, and raise it to a justifiable level. Any change we need to be able to justify. So once that is done, it's possible to add there will be an addition of a small amount of new growth, potentially.
Becky, can you just briefly explain to me how that works? Because I know you can't close the books until the recap and all that, but how do you justify the increased assessed value without a new assessment? Just by doing a survey yourself, by the assessor doing a survey?
Well, with the assessor reviewing all the information, he's getting the updates based on the sales for this year. Well, it's actually for FY20.
Right.
But it's similar to the process we used last year. We added the $3 million based on the knowledge we had on the solar farm and other changes in value.
Yeah, that's what these highlighted numbers are here, right, Becky? This is what town meeting was approved, was 223 million.
Oh,
Which is
I'm
based on,
still
We're not looking at, we're looking at the expenses here.
you're looking at expenses.
That's what I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, that's what I see.
Oh geez, okay, let
You
me,
just have to refresh, maybe.
I'm sorry, I need to do something here. Let me,
But Becky, on that point about the new growth and the assessed values, if we have an idea of what the new growth is, we can certainly back into what the additional assessed value for that new growth is, and we should be able to increase the assessed value by that amount, right?
Well, the new growth figures Kevin tracks very closely. And he's anticipating a much smaller number this year, maybe a couple of half houses, but nothing compared to what we had last year. So the new growth piece is not anticipated to be high. But if it is high, the concern is that we won't be able to utilize it under the
But that's my point.
under 2%, 2.5%.
Right, but if we know we're going to get $1,000 in new growth revenue on a $25 tax rate, then we know that the value of the properties, just gonna throw a number out, $25,000 would be the value of those properties. So we would want to increase this by $25,000. Because we would know that he knows the value that is generating that additional growth, new growth revenue.
Mhm.
So we should be able to at least increase it by that, and that will mitigate.
Well, that's
some-
what's really odd, George, is the assessed value never includes new growth. The new growth always comes in through this up door, this other door,
Right,
and then is added to the value in the next year.
right. My understanding, the way he explained it, Kevin, was that doesn't really land until it's been incorporated into our inventory. So can't count it as part of against our levy until it's part of our inventory and the people are paying taxes. So that takes another year, essentially,
But-
right? For
Yeah,
that-
so they give it to you because you can count it as new growth before it's fully
Before it lands.
part of the,
Well, the new growth that we add is the new revenue that we know we're going to collect next year. It's the calculation that Kevin makes of the new revenue that we're going to collect in 2022.
Yeah, right.
So that means that when he does the recap in the fall, that he's going to be calculating the tax rate on a total assessed value of the town that includes the value of those new taxable properties or
Well-
renovations.
yeah, but it's going to be in a different category. It's not going to be part of your full assessed value. I think it's accounted for separately.
Don't forget, there's a permit out for demolition this year, so that's gonna be a
But
subtraction.
it does. There's a couple demolitions.
Oh, is that true? Oh, that's
Yeah,
too bad.
so
Oh,
that
they're not
Inverse growth.
expensive projects? I mean,
Well,
expensive.
It's gonna be a knockdown, so there'll be a permit to build it in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so then we'll
something
get
bigger
it.
and better that's going to give us more money in the long run.
Yeah. But for the short run, it'll reduce. So I'll be working with Kevin. He just got back from vacation and maybe he'll join us for the next meeting when we can present a new number for the total assessed value.
Okay.
He definitely said he wasn't ready to do that when I talked to him before a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
You all see the revenue document now? Is this-
Yes,
Okay.
that was great. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, and this is to your point earlier, Becky, I think, and for town meeting approved, we ended up at a conservative increase at 223 million. And then the
Yep.
final recap came in at almost 226 million. So you're saying that's the same process we're going through right now. We're going to get it from Kevin, some type of a conservative estimate. And then we'll get a final recap in October or whenever.
Yep.
And that's the one item here on revenue that you said is going to have some significant change that you're aware of right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless, unless the state budgets change, they're not going to change.
Okay, well, yeah, you don't think by the time they wrap that whole process up, a couple iterations from now in the fall?
I doubt that they'll give, I mean, they've already level funded us and there's
Yeah.
shortfalls in other areas that they need to address.
Okay, so you think that's a pretty firm number then?
Yeah.
The state revenue?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But remember, the other piece is, so I think the goal in this budget is to stay as, I think we're managing to fill the gap from created by the $220,000 used in free cash last year and that's where we are at this point.
Mhm. Okay,
Jim, do you want to scroll down to the bottom?
of the second page?
Yeah, So you can see that despite the fact we've removed the $220,000 here.
Where is
and
that? Where are you, Becky?
What line?
Line
You got line number.
53,
53?
yes.
Oh, okay.
So last year we had the $220,000 to get to the 6,620,000. This year, without the 220,000 there, we're at 6,646,000. So we've come very close, we're very close to having, we're doing a good job in minimizing the increase to the budget from last year.
Mhm.
But this document includes an increase in taxes, the tax rate of what, 2.4% or something, or 2 point? Is that part of this calculation in this spreadsheet, what the tax rate will do?
It's not, but it's definitely not a 2.4% increase. I think
What
Um,
do you estimate? What do you guesstimate?
I apologize. I haven't played with that calculation. I can try to do it while people are.
That's this, let's see, we can,
And the numbers are here. We can just do the math.
you're just gonna do the math. George,
Just wanted.
what is it, George?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to go look.
Well, I see the property tax levy limit.
Divide the 5,000,000, 300, I always get confused, 5,350,461 into the 225,990,400. Right? Isn't that what we do?
Yeah, that sounds,
Yeah, you take the value of the amount to be raised from taxes, that's line 23, Becky?
Yep. Yeah.
And into the
Or
value of the properties.
I think it's. Okay.
2367. What's the tax rate this year? 2249?
2261.
2261. Okay, that's right. Yeah, because that's right. We talked, it was just over $1 higher.
yeah. But it's probably gonna become less than that because this 225 number is likely to be higher. This number here
Yes.
is likely to go higher, so that'll reduce the tax rate.
Oh, yeah, we were 23. Yeah, so 2261 goes to 2368. I actually had it in my notes from last month.
1% higher.
$1.07. But new growth that to the extent that we can show new growth, that will get knocked down.
Well, we're going to discuss later. We're going to look at the overall budget at some future meeting, right? And
Yeah.
we have better numbers in that regard.
Yeah. So it would be helpful to have a revised total value.
When do you think that there would be an estimate for that, Becky?
Well, that's what I need. I need Kevin's assistance in that, and I will talk to him again tomorrow. He wasn't ready for it a couple weeks ago, so I'm not sure. I'm not positive. Hopefully in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, Bob, to your point about having some discussion, I know Susie, you earlier had some ideas or some discussion on this, right?
Yep.
You wanted to,
I have some expense numbers I wanted to check out. In line 84,
okay, let me find the expense.
I love having the numbers there on the revenue page. It's so much easier.
Finally.
Oh,
Well, helpful. So line 84, it's the wages, and I'm wondering if the police,
I'm sorry, which line?
line 84, it's police wages.
Okay, can everybody see?
Yep.
Do we have expenses up?
Yep.
Okay, line 84, okay.
So we knew that this number was put together by Dan. And I didn't know if any of the responsibilities that Kristen is holding is going to change any of this. And that the chief's numbers were based on Dan, I would imagine. I don't really I wondered about all this. And then I also thought, we don't know for sure what the police academy for Kristen in FY22 will be, but this would be a good time to think about putting in a training line, so that we can, figure that out. It's not in there. I don't believe it's in there.
Yeah, it wasn't in Dan's numbers that he presented to us,
The training was not,
right?
Or
If you
the-
look back at his budget, there was no discussion of training.
For the
And-
academy, and there are probably other training amounts too, but we know of the academy one.
yeah, that makes sense because the number he's put out there for the operating is the same as it's been for other years, which did not include training. Right?
So how would we go about re-examining the chief and police wages to reflect the situation we're in now? And what about the idea of creating a training line and going ahead and putting in some decided number for the academy? And so that line, we would expect to fluctuate a lot. I like having it separated from operating expenses because we would know more about why it's fluctuating.
Bob?
Yeah, I think AJ had his hand up first. Go ahead, AJ.
Oh,
Well, just on this issue, I mean, I think it's probably too big to tackle here, but it just seems to me like, if I'm not mistaken, at least for as long as I've been participating on the finance committee, the police wages line seems to get underspent every year. And I know there's always good explanations for why that is in terms of the department's hiring and, shift schedules. But it seems like something's kind of out of whack where like the wages line is sort of consistently underspent. Please someone correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I feel like, am I wrong, Becky? Okay.
No, I mean, your observations are correct,
Okay.
but before our old police chief left, they were always overspent.
I see.
We
Okay. So
went
this is a new
through,
phenomenon.
yeah, so it took a long time to correct the Tom Harding's, because he didn't calculate in any of the union negotiated stipends and different things
see.
like that had to be paid, or the holiday pay or a number of other things. So he would come out short. So Dan really
Yeah.
worked at calculating all those other things. But then he was operating without one of his full-time officers for an extended
Yeah.
period of time, which he
Yeah.
still was when he left.
Right.
So what you've seen is what it
Right.
is, but it
Okay.
it
Yeah.
hasn't always been this way.
I guess my takeaway from that, and I appreciate giving me the longer sort of historical context, but it just seems like, I mean, I like kind of what Kristen was sharing in terms of her commitment to having a well-trained department, and I guess I would like her and the department as a whole to be kind of incentivized to kind of pursue that plan. And so I just worry that putting sort of kind of too many constraints on her desire to invest in training for the department. I just worry about that sort of coming into conflict at the same time, there's at least seems to be a fair amount of recent history of the department sort of underspending its wages line. So I guess, I mean, in some universe, I don't know how to do it, but I wonder if there's a way to sort of create a appropriately funded training line and adjust the police wages line based on sort of recent history. But anyway, just to throw that out there.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to remind.
Well, maybe, unless, Becky, were you going to try to respond?
No, I'll go after Bob. That's fine.
Okay,
I just want to remind the committee that, the chief did say specifically in a couple of years that he wanted to add more training. And actually, he broke out the training and made a separate line, and we asked him to combine it back into operating expenses and just use that as a kind of overall kind of category rather than breaking it into little pieces. So if we decide that we want to support training, we have to adjust the operating expense because that includes a significant amount of money for training. We just have to be aware. We can't just add things on all the time. We have to be analytical about this. I recall distinctly Chief Fernandez talking about training as a big concern and a big emphasis for him. And we supported that, and he did break it out. And then we asked him to make an omnibus category to include training in it, and don't make it too detailed because there was his budget request was too detailed. And we all agreed it was too detailed, but certainly training was included in that budget request.
It was.
Yeah.
Does somebody have
Well,
it? Can we
Bob,
pull up on the
Bob,
screen?
George,
Bob, yeah,
Yes.
Bob, but you look at his fiscal year 20 budget is 19,000, which is basically the same as the subsequent couple of years. In 2020, we had no training.
Well, the money
But
got
we
spent anyway.
still had the same, but we had the same expenses on this operating line.
Well, that is part of the problem with having a large category that has no restrictions. It's up to him to spend it any way he wants. If he doesn't have the training that year, he spends it on something else.
okay, number one, we had training every year. Okay.
Oh.
There's been it's required. Every police officer has
Sure.
40 or 80 hours of required training every year.
Right.
And that has been coming out of the expenses budget. Bob, what you're remembering where you're throwing the training in was that he broke out all the vacation, the overtime, the holiday pay, the
Yeah.
cell phone stipends. He broke out all of those items. That's what we got rid of again. It had nothing to do with training at all. He's never put additional funds in the
I
budget
didn't say
that
that,
had to
Becky.
do with
I didn't
training.
say additional funds. I said he supported the budget, the training aspect of the budget out of that category.
Out of
So if we
expenses.
create a new category, we should remember that there's money in the budget for training now, as you just said. That's all.
Yes, but I also want you guys to realize that a significant portion of training these days can happen online. So there are different categories. Some cost money and some are, an investment of time and not that they don't have a fee. So you really want to look at and analyze how much money is actually being spent on training before you start creating new lines for it or reducing other lines for the assumption that's how it was spent. Because you just,
As a builder, I have.
George and then Susie?
I would agree with Bob. If there's ongoing operating costs, I can see breaking them out, but I wouldn't want to do it if they're less than a certain amount, $1,000 or 500. So we need to figure that out, but it sounds like there's more on that coming down the pike based on the new bill signed by the governor in the legislature. The other question, the other thing I want to talk about was the academy is not necessarily an ongoing expense, is it? The academy comes and goes. If things went the way we want, these people, a person who graduates from the academy works for us for 5 years, and we don't need to send somebody. So to me, we could build the academy in here and have it roll over. I think Susie suggested that, which makes sense to me. Or, if we can anticipate it and anticipate the cost, just use free cash and make a transfer to cover that, just because it's not an ongoing operating item. Those are my 2 points.
Right.
Susie, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm reading the budget that Dan gave us, and it does say operating budget will remain level funded. This includes department supplies, training, and other expenses related to everyday operation of the department, and that was 19,000. So because training could be something as simple as online, or it could be a class that that she's talking about for de-escalation that's 400. I reiterate that having a line called training, I think also assures the citizenry that we have this, that the department's doing that. And I wondered about the free cash, because when it comes up as a warrant article, does it have to be specified that this is free cash to send a police person to the academy, or is it just a general concept of using free cash?
Where is the free cash issue coming from? Did I miss that?
If we ended up funding the academy out of free cash instead of a separate budget line.
Okay.
Then the warrant article would have to specify that it's for sending a person to the academy. Is that correct, Becky?
Right.
I guess.
Yeah, the purpose has to be identified.
Free cash.
Yeah, so that's the answer.
My thought on that is why would, if going into the fiscal year and the chief is putting together his budget or her budget, why wouldn't they include in there the academy if they thought there was a good chance there was going to be an academy and build it into the budget?
Yeah, and I just wonder if we had it as a separate line called training, it makes the operating expenses not roller coaster. They would hold, and then the training would go up and down, which seems to be more appropriate to me.
That seems okay. I'm just concerned. I'm just saying we don't always want to manage, I think, using free cash to take something that's not budgeted. In a case like this, where maybe there are chances we could budget it. It could be included in the budget.
Just one thing, Jim, as Kristen pointed out, and we all know, this is an evolving situation which has not really been distilled or cleared up yet by the state in terms of what kind of training is going to be required and how it will be implemented over time. So I think it's kind of premature for us to be planning on something which we really don't fully understand the implications of, which is an ongoing process that should become clearer to us hopefully later this year, but certainly there's a lot of X factors in this as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
And I agree with George about funding the academy through a warrant article because, you know, we've had some difficulties with that in the past. But again, we don't know what our requirements are going to be, what the requirements for our offices are going to be. And so it's kind of hard to plan for that at this point.
Yeah. George.
Yeah, Jim, I would just add to what Bob said, just one thing. The reason I would be okay with paying for the academy with free cash is because it's not it should not be a recurring item. We're not going to pay for it year after year. If Kristen goes to the academy, signs the agreement to work for us for the next 4 or 5 years, then the likelihood that we're going to need to spend money on it again is fairly low. And historically, we haven't been paying for it year after year. So we've had kind of this weird period. So that's why I was saying I'd be comfortable with spending free cash on this particular expense.
Yeah, I think in a situation where we don't have any clarity at all on whether we're going to spend the money or how much, then
well,
maybe
hopefully we will soon. She said, you know, she's going to find out if they're going to have the bridge between the part-time and the full-time academy, what that'll look like and what that will cost. Hopefully we'll know in time for town meeting.
Yeah, but normally, wouldn't we want, if going into a fiscal year budget planning process, a department head knows they're going to need a certain amount of money, let's say for an academy, wouldn't they want to build that into the budget?
Again, it's not reoccurring. We may not have to spend for it again in a long time. So it's not something we want to put in the recurring budget. Or
Well,
it's not something we want to.
I'm not saying it's in a recurring budget. I'm talking about the budget for one particular year. The budget for one particular year included.
So it could be a free cash expenditure for one particular year.
It's one off.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you manage the funding of it, but
Well, that's the point, Jim. That's what we're talking about is the funding of it. We're talking, yeah, if it goes in the budget, that's fine. Then we would have a line item, free cash for academy for that amount. Yeah, I'm talking about the funding. And that's why I'm saying using free cash, non-recurring.
We've done that in the past. I'm not sure. I don't recall what the item was, but we did something for a department. I think it was the school where it was a one-off expense and we put it into their budget and we funded it from the free cash reserves. And so that we could maintain the fact that it was a one-off allocation instead of embedding it into a permanent budget line, you know? Like you say, George.
I think we've done for a lot of things over time.
Yeah.
Becky.
Okay, just because I got the rundown, a more detailed rundown from Kristen on the full-time qualified academy, it's gonna be required for any part-time officer. So it might not just be Kristen. It's gonna come down to, we'll probably end up with potentially 2 part-time officers in the department that we have currently that don't have full-time academy and training. And it will be required for them to maintain police department status to also go through the bridge program. So it, with the changes, we don't, they just appointed the committee that's working on how to implement this whole thing. And they're dealing with a lot of vision right now, but not a lot of bolts, nuts and bolts. So as they're hoping by July 1st to have figured out how this program is going to work and how to set people in motion and actually start going to the academy in FY22. So we know we're going to have this activity. There is promises made by Joe Comerford, not promises, but she is working diligently to try to find grant funding for the Bridge Academy. She and other legislatures don't feel that the full cost of this or the cost of this at all should be dumped on the small towns when they're being mandated to make these changes for the police overhaul. So there are a lot of questions around this issue. And hopefully in the next couple months, maybe by May, end of May, we'll know what kind of adjustment to make to either the budget or to a warrant article that will help with this, or we might be able to get grants and not have to worry about additional funding. We don't know yet.
Right. So we might have a funded mandate for a change.
Yeah, that would be a new.
Yeah, that's dreaming.
That's a pipe dream?
Yeah, I think so.
We have a third option, and that is the finance committee's reserve fund is for unanticipated. And at this point, the information might not allow us to know what that number is. And so we could also go that route if needed, once FY22 begins rolling. But
Just like we did an hour ago.
right. So, but we'd have to remember that we said we'd do that.
So AJ, it's got to go in the minutes.
Exactly true, especially if we don't get clarification till the end of the fiscal year after town meeting.
Right.
So, we can't really act in an analytical and kind of decisive way without some information. And God knows when the state will provide that information. And I'm glad Joe Comerford is going to bat for us, and maybe we can get the state to provide funds for police reform to, across the Commonwealth, and it'll work out, so I think there's a chance that'll happen, a good chance.
Okay. All right. So this started with the rest of the wages laid out with the kind of staffing that we have now. And do we need to know that, or are we in a ballpark that's okay? And then we've just beat the academy to death. So the other one I wanted to talk about is, I didn't remember the story on line 152, which is the open space for 5,000. Sounds like a Jeopardy question, huh?
Oh, that's a wonderful thing to bring up, because that was requested by Penny Jakes, who is working on the open space plan through the Open Space Committee. And I got word in the last couple of weeks that potentially there's $8,000 available from FERCog for that project. So there's a good, I just need to confirm with Penny that she doesn't need the $5,000 anymore.
All right.
Wow,
That helps.
nice.
All right.
Thank you, Susie.
Okay. And then I had a general principle, which is penny wise and pound foolish. And so, you know, the departments brought in their budget. Tim was willing to try to make a cut, hoping that the catch basins cleaning program would work. But I guess I want to think about trying to make decisions that will prevent problems. And I don't know if that offer from him was penny wise and pound foolish.
I think the
And
difference
what was
there,
that offer?
He cut, where is this?
He cut $1,000 off
Yeah,
of the
line
catch basin.
125. He cut it by 1,000 and I just like, really? Okay.
his
120.
rationale sounded pretty good.
Very
I mean,
good.
he seemed pretty convinced that he wasn't going to need the 1,000.
Yeah, that was my takeaway from that discussion. I think we sort of, I thought pressure tested that with Tim.
Yep.
Quite a bit, I thought.
Yep.
He seemed fairly comfortable, that was my reaction too.
Mhm.
Yeah, he knows the catch basins, and some of them don't need the same kind of maintenance as the ones that are really busy, that get a lot of sediment too. So he knows he can safely skip some of the, just put them on a longer sequence than other ones. And so that results in a less cost to him.
And we said we would back him up with finance reserve funds if there was a problem he needed to address.
Yeah,
Right.
And that
$1,000.
is that in the minutes?
The way AJ's probably got him in there.
For sure.
Just want to remember that.
I just want to bring up something else, and I'm sorry I didn't mention it when Tim was talking about that. I think we are, the agreement that we made with the state was that these catch basins would be cleaned annually. So I think Tim's program might be shortchanging the commitment, and we probably need to look into that. Not that they audit.
Yeah, do they come and look down the hole?
With a
I
big
think he
stick.
might have actually made reference to that now that you say that. I think he did make reference to the fact that, you know, he's aware that he's got to watch those culverts on the main roads, on the Leverett Road.
Yeah. Yeah, because
He
that,
snaps on 'em. He sends Steve around to inspect them on a regular basis.
yep.
All right. What time is it?
I had a couple lines that I wanted to ask about as well.
Great.
Okay, George.
The veterans benefits, 144. I know the treasurer really thinks we should fully fund that because 2 people could move into town, but you know, when's the last time that's happened? This year, we're not even coming close to that 15,000. It seems like a high number to me.
So you're recommending it be reduced to 8,000?
Or 10,000 or something smaller. I mean, it's 8,000 per person per year. Is that the cost, Becky?
That's, well, you just don't know. I mean, it depends when they move in. If they move in July, then it could be 25,000. But if they move in April, it could be 4,000. I mean, it just depends what their old job was. Like when we had a physician vet move into town, it was like 30,000, boom, just overnight.
Wow.
So it's a real variable one.
144.
But we are raising it this year, is that right? Raising the budget.
By $7,000. We're doubling
We
it.
don't have a veteran at all. So I don't understand the logic of that,
Well,
Yeah,
that's why I recommended going back down to the 8,000.
and which I think we discussed, and I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and Becky, I'm looking at back to fiscal year 18 on that line. And there's no years that they're all well below, way below.
Yeah, the history is not,
Yeah.
it's not anywhere near this number.
Yeah. So just looking at our history, at least back to 18, fiscal year 18, we're operating well below these numbers.
Yep. I think that could be, and it's one of those that it's mandated to fund. So if it changes, he'll be knocking on the FinCom door for
We'll
reserve
answer
transfer.
with a smile.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Susie,
So
Are
that-
you okay with 8,000 then, George?
yeah, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to throw that out there as whatever the committee thinks, but I just thought.
Great.
what about everybody else?
I'm fine with it.
And I think that this is a situation that, I understand why our treasurer would recommend this because it looks like standing on an edge that's not sturdy enough. But it could be that in the year it blows out the budget because somebody moves to town. We could go to a special town meeting and have a free cash transfer. And then in the following year, change our budget line to reflect what's going on.
Yep, and maybe to some extent FinCom reserve can cover it too. So there's options.
Mhm. So 8,000?
Yeah.
So a $7,000 pickup. The other line I wanted to ask about was retirement county. I know we probably, I know we talked about this with the treasurer. Is that number known?
Where are you, George?
I'm sorry, 162. So we also increased that we increased that one by $7,000. And I was just wondering, I don't remember what the basis. I know we talked about it with the treasurer. I just don't remember the conversation.
I have a quote from, shoot, it was right here. Okay, I had the number from the retirement board, and then we have to add in the Union 28 retirement from the regular town. With Union 28, we get an assessment. I'm sorry, I'm not finding my report from the retirement board, but I added those two numbers together. This year's, so it could go, might need to go up a few thousand more dollars. I have to
So there's,
check on, because the Union 28 estimate I have is from fiscal 21. I don't have one from FY 22. And that leaves it open to potential change. Sorry, George.
no, that's okay. That's good. That's what I want to hear. So what you're saying though, what I'm hearing is there's real data to back this up. It's not another situation like we talked about with the, I can't remember what line item it was, but the veterans benefits. It's not that situation. That's 7,000 is being added because we have real information that shows that it's increasing.
Yes.
Retirement.
We get a quote from the retirement board every year, and then we have to go to Union 28 and get their portion and add those two together.
Becky, do we have a
Don't
town
add them
employee?
together, get in trouble.
Becky, do we have any town employees that are scheduled to retire this year? That would affect our number, wouldn't it?
We have a rolling number of employees from the school that retire, and I
Oh,
can't.
that's part of the school employees are part of that?
Yeah. Regular town employees, not this year, but we're gonna have a few, then we'll have potentially two next year, two department heads next year.
But we get a bump from that, don't we, in our cost? When we have an employee that retires, we get cover their retirement directly, or do we not?
We're part of the Franklin County retirement
So it's a
system.
big trust that doesn't have much impact on a year to year if one employee retires.
There can be because they plan ahead for it, but it can be a bump.
Yeah.
But they have it, that it's actually, an actuarial, so they have everybody in the pool and we're already paying into the pool.
Depends on who dies.
Yeah. That always helps.
Thanks a lot.
Don't record this meeting.
It's recording.
Hmm.
Susie did bring it up.
So do we have time to talk about,
That's right. Susie's retiring this year.
I did already, I'm
Yeah,
done.
but you haven't gotten, yeah.
I'm bumped.
Is she in the 21 budget?
Assessment. You're in the next year's assessment.
You're part of that 7,000, Susie?
Yeah,
Oh, come on. You're not helping.
mail me the check. So do we have time to start talking about free cash, assigning some of these costs to free cash? Or do we need to step back and look at the big picture to decide if we want to do that?
Well, what's the time? What's the hour?
9:15.
Seems like it's a big topic.
Well, maybe we should do the one where we plan the rest of the schedule and what topics we will take on the calendar and when.
Yeah, do we want to get into that?
Well, we don't want to forget to do some of it.
Yeah. Do we want to get into that? Agree on some key topics that we want to make sure we include in upcoming agendas?
Sounds good.
Is that what you're suggesting, Susie?
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, we had a little discussion on that our last meeting. We talked about free cash being one of those.
and OPEB.
Yeah, and OPEB. George, you talked about best practices. Was that mostly around free cash?
Yeah, that's about funding the budget.
About
Yes.
what?
It's the same conversation that that Bob thought we don't have time for. It's around funding the budget. And
Okay.
To what extent do we use free cash? So that would be a future, that would be in that first topic.
So when we talk about free cash, it's not just about the budget, isn't it about how we fund maybe capital also, capital projects? I mean, that's one of the options for capital projects
Mhm.
amongst
Well, they're
others.
same and separate. I mean, they're connected, but there really is going to be a conversation about what's presented to us from the capital planning committee.
Yeah, so is that a key topic is the capital plan and how we fund?
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And when is our next meeting? Is it, we have one scheduled for next week or not?
I think right now we're talking about 2 weeks from now,
Uh,
unless the team feels we should have one next week.
well, select board meets next week, right? The
Yeah, I
13th.
wouldn't be able to make next week's, and Melody might not be able to make it either.
Can you make the select board meeting at 5:30, George? Or personnel
Yes.
board?
Yeah, next week, yes, I can.
Yeah.
I'll just need a reminder, but yes.
So we're talking the 20th?
20th. Mhm.
Yeah,
20th. I'm traveling, but I should be back by then.
that's okay. AJ, that's okay for you?
Yeah, I'm traveling that day, but I think I should be back by then. I think I should be okay.
AJ, is April vacation for schools still happening?
Yeah, it's that week. That's why I'm going to be in New York, but I'm coming back on the 20th.
Great.
What's the current thinking on being able to go through the capital plan?
Well, we're having a capital planning meeting on Monday, the 12th. So I don't know what will come of that, but that'll be before our meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll have whatever occurs there, we'll be able to report, AJ and myself will be able to report to FinCom.
So that would be an agenda item for our April 20th meeting?
Well, the capital plan needs to present to finance committee.
Yeah, and that would be on the 20th, right?
I don't know,
We don't know
I
yet.
don't know what will be resolved our next meeting. So I don't know if it's wise to schedule it at this point. What do you think, Becky?
I'm not sure because the HVAC is in there and that's a work in progress.
You're right, and it's something I'm not sure will be resolved on Monday, but it's something we're going to deal with on Monday for sure. But the other items in the capital plan, there are other big discussions for the FinCom to have about funding the big capital expenses this year. I don't know if the capital planning committee will make recommendations on those items or not, but certainly the town has to make some decisions about how to fund upcoming large projects, and we should have some discussion, some analysis of the options that are available to the town. I don't know when the right time to talk about those things is, but certainly something that we should put on our agenda at some point in the near future.
It doesn't seem, Bob, like the capital planning committee is gonna be discussing the big projects, right? I mean, it just hasn't come
No.
up, right? So
The culvert and the school
the
roof.
culvert and the roof, yeah.
Yeah, and I've gotten, I have gross estimates for both at this point. But the bids are still, haven't gone out yet, and they're gonna be coming back really close to the, later in May. So we're working to get those out in the next couple of weeks, but I do have gross numbers. We can have that discussion around the gross numbers, just conceptually how to pay for them, and then get a more refined number when we have it. But I think the concepts, when you're talking, the two together are over $1 million. So I think that gives us plenty of substance to talk about how to fund it. And that discussion should include Ryan Mayu, our treasurer, so he can advise the different scenarios that he might recommend. In case, a portion of it might be, you might recommend to borrow, and we need to look at what the interest rates are, and he can provide all of that.
Is that something, Becky, that we might be able to cover in our next meeting?
20th.
I think theoretically, yes. So I can check and see if Ryan's available for the 20th. So have that discussion before we dig into the free cash use and free cash, OPEB, and what else is on the list? Yeah, because we're talking about the major capital projects.
I just want to suggest that we talked about having this discussion as a committee, earlier in the year, and I think we can do that without being involved in detailed discussions with Ryan, and just kind of explore the issue in general terms about what options, what our attitude is philosophically about these things, what guidance we might get from the state and from Becky and from others, and I think that would be useful and productive to do that before we get into the weeds on the issue, on these specific projects.
So we're not talking about capital.
Talking about free cash and where we were at with free cash and what our options are to deal with upcoming expenses, great and small and so forth,
Yeah, but isn't Ryan, I think what Becky, you're talking about is Ryan would be there to talk about the different approaches.
Well, I think what Bob is saying is that he's not ready to address capital until we have a more philosophical discussion about how to use funding sources, whether they be reserves or borrowing, and how we look at the overall long-term capital plan in that view.
Without Brian, we can't understand the debt service side of it. We need to know the timing of when we're going to spend the money, the timing of the borrowing if we decided to do that, and the timing of the debt service. Will it be next fiscal year or the following fiscal year? I can't have a conversation about this if I don't understand the finance mechanisms. I know about debt service, but I don't know how it would affect our budget next year. If we complete these projects in the fall, when does the debt service start, and what will the interest rates potentially be, and how is the debt service managed? 5 years, 7 years? And so there are basic questions I need to know to have a conceptual conversation.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I think we all agree these two big projects are going to happen, and we know roughly what dollar range they're going to be in, and it really comes down, I think, to George, what you're talking about is exploring, understanding clearly the various ways to fund these projects and then come into some agreement on how we go forward. Susie?
There is also quite a bit in the FinCom handbook, the Association of Town Finance Committees, talking about capital planning and laying out sequences of things. So I found it to be helpful. I'm gonna have to read it again. But you know, I don't want us to be limited in how we approach this when there's some information that could be helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's the upshot?
Sounds like what we're looking to do is try to get Ryan included on the agenda for our next meeting. We go through the various funding scenarios. And we all come away from that discussion with a better understanding of what our options are and what those options, the implications for those options.
And if we don't finish that night, we can continue that conversation in a later meeting.
Yeah.
We still have time. And so when do we have to have the budget, if I may ask right now, wrapped up?
I'm think around the 10th of May.
Tick, tick, tick.
Bearing down on us.
Yeah, the 20th, the 20th of April is in 2 weeks. I mean, wow. Tick,
Yeah,
tick,
exactly.
tick.
You know, I wonder if for items, and we've talked about a number of items we want to make sure we include on upcoming agendas. What about, maybe I throw this to Becky, this funding, this federal funding that's coming our way. And we have some rough idea of what that number is looking like, right, over the next year or two.
Yep, we have the number. I'll send the report out to everybody. But we don't have the guide. We need the guidelines.
How to spend it, what's allowed to spend.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's premature to talk up. Okay.
We, like Bob reviewed, the one good news is the air quality or the HVAC issue at the school can be potentially at least partially funded through this. But we also have the green communities possibility to explore, and that project is going to be ongoing. Hopefully we can get it funded at town meeting, but if it can be grant funded, we don't have the obstacle of, I mean, the timing won't be as critical. So if all the planning and work isn't done until July and we miss town meeting, then there's still a chance it can be funded in other ways. So you agree, Bob?
It's like everything else. We were having a hard time getting, really clear information, but hopefully we'll get it soon, right, Becky?
Yep, and the school is working with, so we're gonna have an engineer review, is gonna be reviewing all the design and potentially doing a site visit and reviewing the proposals that we currently have to help make sure that there isn't stuff in there that is not necessary.
I was doing a little reading on the American Rescue Plan and what limited information there is about uses of those funds. And it sounds like there are 4 broad categories, but I'm sure that the details are going to matter. But one of them is response to public health emergency or its negative economic consequences, then provision of premium pay to eligible workers, revenue replacement, and investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure.
George, looks like you had your hand up.
Yeah, you were asking about future agenda items. I was just thinking, I don't think this is necessary for the budget, but I think we, as a committee, should be looking at a long range forecast model and make sure that we don't forget about that after we complete the budget.
Long range forecast model for what?
So, when Joe Markarian visited with us and helped us with the various policies, one of the policies and one of the models he gave us, and I know Becky's taken it and done a lot with it, is a 5-year, I think it is, Becky, forward-looking budgets over the course of 5 years, revenues and expenses. And with this conversation about about solar and the potential revenue that solar can create, conversations about OPEB funding and the regional assessments, we can start to put a couple models together to see how these different things could affect us in the long run. It's not something we're never necessarily going to make decisions on and present anything to town with, but it gives us a better idea of what's coming down the pike and how some of the financial decisions we're making are, what the long-term impact of those are. My experience in the finance committee and at town meetings and special town meetings, there's a lot of people thinking about short-term and very few people thinking about long-term. And I really think we should have something to kind of get us to take that different perspective that we typically don't.
When you're talking about modeling, you're talking about specific to revenue and expense.
Yeah, it's, what we propose, what we bring to town each year.
Yeah.
What would those look like in the next 5 years, 23, 24, 25, if things happen, and we can adjust those numbers in certain ways. I think is useful.
Yeah, that's, we look at some of these training programs and some of these handbooks and whatnot that are put out at the state level. They talk about that as a primary responsibility for finance committees, for municipal finance committees.
And we're busy, we don't always have the time for it. And then, in the heat of the battle, and then when the battle's over, we're all like, phew, let's go home. But yeah, and
that sounds like that could be like a 3-day discussion by itself, that whole topic.
Not a bad summer meeting, when things are a little light.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like we need to get to that discussion, and without trying to find answers, but try to understand what's there. And I would like to commit to doing that after town meeting.
Yeah, so maybe that's something that early in the upcoming fiscal year, that's a focus.
Yeah, our last meeting in June.
That's not something we're looking to do the next month or so. I
No,
guess is what you're saying. Okay.
no, you got to get ready for town meeting.
Okay. All right.
Barely
So
get
one
to our
of the
agendas
meetings-
now.
One of the meetings we need to have is where we approve all the articles. And what date, you said the budget wrapped up by May 10th, and when's the date to approve all the articles?
Is that a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm pulling up a
Okay.
calendar so I can.
Oh, Becky's
So
deep
there-
in thought.
So Tuesday, the 11th is potentially, okay, so if the budget's all wrapped up and the warrant is, yeah. So the 11th, if we could wrap up the budget on the 11th and then have it, now does that work out right for it to be a select board meeting on the 18th?
2,
Yeah, they're both Tuesdays.
3, 4, 4.5 weeks later. From the select board, no, 1, 2,
Okay, so right now we're on,
3.5 weeks later, if the
7.
select board met on the 18th.
So the 11th is actually a select board meeting.
Try to,
Um,
the 11th is select board, okay?
May 11th?
yeah. So if the warrant can be pretty much together by then, if you guys could have the final, yeah, no, we need,
Have the budget done by the 4th? Is that what you're saying? We
I
would
don't
need-
know if that's necessary. That's what I'm trying to figure out because,
Well,
okay,
you can tell
Well-
us in the next.
we have through June 8th. 6, 8, 6, 1, 5/25. Okay, this is the last meeting. We have to do the mailing, we have to get it out to the public. So if the budget is wrapped up by the 18th, if FinCom wraps up the budget on the 18th, Select Board finishes the warrant by the 25th. It's a little, they could have a meeting the same week on a different day. If the 25th is probably going to be too tight to send.
Yeah.
So,
Let's just move it all back a week.
yeah, I, May 18th, if everything's wrapped up by the 18th and ready for print on the night, on the 20th. Does that give enough time? Well, we're not printing anything.
Oh,
So there's no
It's all
mail.
gonna be
not for
online.
mailing. Well, they mailed the last, our town.
They did, but we did not mail out the budgets and all the budget information. We had a hearing
In FY '21.
in FY '20. So if we have a hearing again, we'd probably want to schedule the hearing for the 25th.
What do you mean by a hearing?
Remember last year we did the
Information
budget hearing?
Oh,
And
okay,
we had Paul Lyons moderated.
okay, yeah.
There was a lot of positive feedback about that. I think we should.
It
try
was
to do
well
that.
attended.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting maybe May 25th for that?
Yep. But we want to get the budget out to people. So if we can wrap it up, if Finance Committee might want to meet on the 11th to wrap up the budget.
And select board's meeting the same night, or you're gonna move your meeting, or we could move ours.
We could, select board meets on the 11th. So FinCon could also meet on the 11th at a different time.
What time is what time of the select board meetings?
They're usually 5:30.
Oh.
So if FinCom
7:30.
George,
7 would probably work.
what's the score?
Oh, I'm not looking. Don't tell me.
Yeah,
I don't know.
good job, George.
No, I got a recording. I just want to say that the week of May 24th through the 28th, I won't be able to attend any meetings. So if the budget hearing's that week, I just can't make that. That's all, for the record.
Well, that's the biggest night of the week, of the year.
Yeah, I'm MIA that week.
Yeah. So we talk about going through the warrants on the 11th.
To do it June 1st, we could do the hearing.
Well,
That's
it's not-
probably
you know,
better.
You don't need me.
No, but June 1st is still 12 days ahead of town meeting.
Yeah.
And if we do it too far out ahead and with our aging population, we'll all forget we had the what's in the.
So that's the June 1st with Paul Lyons and a public Zoom hearing.
Yep,
But everything else has been buttoned up before that. I mean,
right.
We obviously settled on the budget and we voted on the warrant articles before June 1st.
And we want to aim for May 11th meeting to do that?
Yep. And I'll talk to, but that's 3 weeks ahead of the hearing.
We discuss this next week, or 20th?
Let's just shoot for May 11th. That's the best plan.
Okay, but we're gonna meet on April 20th, and 2 weeks from that is May 4th. So we have time to meet and then go ahead and meet on the 11th as well. April 20th, May 4th, May 11th.
There's always May 27th if we need it. Oh, wait, April 27th if we need it.
April 27th, right?
Yeah.
So
And we might be able to push to May 18th if we need it to.
so
Okay, thank you guys that's important stuff. Appreciate you working it through.
So what I did here is that we do want to talk about funding scenarios and OPEB. I think it helps to have done that before town meeting. It may not be directly related to the budget and town meeting discussion, but I think that that's two things that are on our 20th agenda or before the end of this.
For the OPEB, Becky, do we need some other people to participate in that meeting?
There was a wonderful consultant who did it one year, but George has got a really solid handle on it at this point.
Well, the
Okay.
treasurer,
George will lead us
The
through.
treasurer, for
The
sure.
treasurer made a
The treasurer,
recommendation.
so treasurer should be there.
Well, the treasurer made a recommendation to us when we talked with him about the budget. And so then I don't know that we need him to come back and say the same thing.
Right. Earlier in the year, I brought up the idea that we could discuss funding some items such as OPEB out of cash versus out of tax levy. And so at some point, maybe the 20th, maybe later, I'll be able to bring that issue before the board. And that and some other lines that might be argued to be reasonable to fund from cash, particularly this year because of the pandemic and all the related problems that households are having. So maybe we can have that discussion on the 20th.
The 20th.
Of
our
April.
next meeting.
And we're actually not expecting any real changes in the draft of this revenue and expenses, other than the COLAs will be put on here.
Yep, the
The
three
COLAs.
items, the 3 or 4 items that Becky went through.
Personnel items and the revenue side, the change in levy, total levy.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, total values.
just to Susie's point, so we have a surplus of 54. We figured about 17 in personnel salary changes. That brings it down to 37. But then we changed the pension benefits, no, veterans benefits by 7. That brings it up to 54. And then if the Open Space Committee gives us another 5, we're back to a surplus of 49,000. So potentially our surplus is changed by no more than 5,000. Will change by no more than 5,000.
So we
So-
don't have to labor it. It'll be clear.
Yeah, it roughly it's the same as where we are now.
And George, in addition to that, there's a couple of contracts that still need,
Yes, good point. Right, that would lower the surplus.
that'll lower it a bit,
Yeah,
possibly.
good point. So I just had that jotted down. I just want to share that. So probably 40 to 45 surplus is what we're looking at right now. If we had to guess what it would be on May 11th.
And we have to write a FinCom report for town meeting
Yep, and that has to be done.
to be able to go out.
Oh,
So maybe following that 11th meeting, one of us, or we could make a subcommittee, do a draft, get it back to people by the 18th. It's not radical. We have a
No.
template and we can work off of that. So,
Yeah, we can use a template that was pulled together from, well, the version from last year.
yeah, we've
Last
been
year's
using
meeting.
that general format. So report, the draft after the 11th.
And who wrote it last year? Was
I think
that?
it was, I think it was mostly Rita and Eric. It's my, does that sound right, AJ or Bob?
Yeah. I think that's right.
No.
Was Wheezy on the board last year?
Yes.
I know
Okay,
she did it the year before.
okay. Because I think she did the first draft and then Eric and Rita made a few updates, but she did the bulk of it, I'm pretty sure.
Because she did it the year before, Becky. I know she did it the last year I was on FinCom.
But
Well,
Rita-
I volunteered to do work with another person and we posted as a subcommittee meeting and draft it.
Yeah, I work with you, Susie.
All right.
Great.
There was no school committee meeting, so I have nothing to report.
Any other? You guys talked about capital. Bob? Looks like Bob, you're on mute. I think you're on mute.
Capital planning meets Monday, and building committee's been
Monday.
put to work investigating the HVAC issue, and we'll present that to capital planning. At least I will on Monday, and we'll hear from Steve Sullivan, who's on that committee and also on school committees. So we'll have a better idea, hopefully, after that, where that project is at and what our options might be in terms of funding.
George, what about personnel? Anything?
Nothing to add from what we already discussed with the recommendation that we're going to make to the select board on Tuesday, which was a method that uses the CPI with a couple circuit breakers, if you will, options. And then the treasurer requested a change to his compensation. So those are the two things at our last meeting.
Okay. The only other item we had on here was expense report. Becky, you sent us an update earlier today. I went through it. Becky, I had a question, since it's our account. The reserve fund,
Yeah,
$75,000, our $75,000 reserve fund. It shows a budget revision of a minus 6850. Should that be a budget revision or should that be actual expended? I'm not sure why there's a 6850 showing up in budget revision
I'm sorry.
for the reserve fund.
I'm trying
that's-
to, I think that's just the way you see the expenses.
It doesn't show up in actual expended.
If you,
This is line 780.
right, but
It's because what happens is anything that comes out of, I'm sorry, here it is.
Oh.
So what happens is budget revision because it's not really expended, the money goes to other lines. So you have a negative here, and then you'll have a positive down here, like the Conservation Commission expense was increased by 500.
Okay,
So that's how it works. It doesn't,
okay,
not really, it's expended through the lines that it's moved to.
okay, gotcha.
It would
And
be like
technically-
double counting it if you
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
recorded it as an expense here.
okay,
and technically, it's not an expense. It's a budget revision. We're revising the reserve fund down and we're revising the other lines up. So it's all accounted for in that column.
okay. Understand.
Transfer.
Cool.
Yes.
Got it. Thanks.
See how easy that is?
That was an easy one.
So I have a couple questions on it as well. If Jim, I'm sorry, Jim, you were still going.
No, good. Go, George.
So the land use clerk line, which I'm looking for right now.
111, first page.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
looks like, so is that done? What's going on with the rest of the work that they have to do through the rest of the year? Are we going to have a problem there?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
You know,
remember I brought it up a couple months ago that with all the NRADs and the heating up, especially if the applications for the solar farms hit before the end of the year, it's gonna greatly,
Got it.
and actually that's, the planning board should be thinking about increasing their budget, but I think what when I talked to them about it, they said their plan is to bring in a planning professional to assist in the solar applications. And they can do that by charging the developer for the cost. So the increase is, for our staff won't be as large as they potentially were last time.
Nice.
If they, this other method, if they can do it. They think they can do it. I haven't found a reason why they can't, so.
Excellent. Yeah, and we haven't looked at expenses in a while, so it's possible I am asking questions about things we've talked about in the past. It's just more to bring me up to speed, if nothing else. The ambulance service, which is on row, it's number 690 on page 2, under product, I'm sorry, protection, person and property. We haven't spent anything on ambulance service this year?
We
What's up
just
with that?
are waiting to, we just got the bill from Amherst.
And
They
that's a
were-
fixed,
Yeah, they were late in getting the bills out.
but that's a fixed number. It's going to be 32,640.
Yeah,
It's been increased for FY 22.
yep.
And then while we're in that section, a couple lines down, we got the dog officer expenses, the tree warden expenses. We haven't spent any money on the tree warden or the tree warden expenses. Do we know why? And how are we budgeting for that next year?
I heard Don Wakaluk, who is our tree warden, say that he is trying to get the utilities or other non-town vendors to take care of things, and he's trying to minimize the impact to the town. I did talk to him at that meeting. I encouraged him that we have a lot of tree issues that haven't been addressed. But he's been reluctant to spend his budget because he doesn't want his taxes to go up, but that's not how a job works. The responsibility is to get the trees taken care of. There's a lot of dead and dying trees in town. So I need to reach out to him about that, because the fact that none of his own hours have been expended is either he is not putting in his timesheets and there's a bunch piled up. So I need to find out if that's the case, because he went over, he spent $2,000 on his salary a year ago. So it's a dramatic change.
And he's not saving any money. He's not saving in taxes because it's already in the budget.
I know.
I'm just saying that's the message he needs to hear.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'll try to check in with him. I think the budget has been modest over time, and it doesn't, $5,000 doesn't go really far, or 4,400 in. And we had the rollover from last year because there was an understanding from his earlier work that a lot of work still needed to be done. But
I need to ask a question. What I see there is it was 4477 and went basically doubled. That increase was just explained to my recollection because of the Pratt Corner Road project required a lot of hand holding from people who were going to lose trees taken down by the power company. And so Don had to be down there every day and support people's concerns and act as a liaison person between them and the tree workers and so forth. But that was a temporary situation that was a major clearing operation that is now over. So I don't see why we would be doubling our budget now. That was
Bob,
a one-off.
Bob, if you look at those lines, could you scroll down again, Jim?
Yep, right
Okay,
there.
The $4,400 carry forward is
Yeah.
not Don's budget. Is not his salary
I
line.
understand that. It's the money that spent on tree companies
Right.
do tree work in town.
Right. So
But-
because the prior year, we had the utilities come through, and Don was able to get them to do most of the work he wanted done.
Right.
And so we carried it forward because we knew there were outstanding issues in other areas of town that still needed to get done.
One thing,
But
just
since we-
sorry, Becky. Tim Hunting's described in his meeting with us that he hires tree companies to do tree work too. So a little confused about how that gets addressed because his budget covers some of these expenses too.
Well, he does tree work like last week. It can happen through either one. They're different in that Tim's are all trees that are, either right in the roadway that he's maintaining.
Right.
The tree warden is any town trees at all. So like when we had to take down a bunch of the pines on the common,
Right.
that was a tree warden project. And there's a number of other areas like that, like on lot 032, if there was something at the school, Don would be responsible for all of those. That's why it's a curiosity that he hasn't asked for any work to get done. I know the MLP had a list of trees that I gave to Highway to find out if they had done them all. And I still need to get it back to make sure that Don takes care of whatever trees are not on their, haven't been taken care of from their list.
Right.
So at this
Yeah,
point,
so Highway got the list from MLP.
yep.
Okay.
So
Susie,
there's
oops.
work to be done. That's why it's curious that nothing's hit the budget yet.
Taking a lot 032, what's the status of that? I noticed we haven't spent any money on that either.
Where are you, George?
So, lot
That
032,
we still need to take down that building and get rid of a lot of trash that's there.
so that money that's sitting, that's been transferring over year,
Yeah,
it's gonna
that
get spent.
project needs to get done. I got to start with Tim on it last year, but we both got distracted. So we have a plan on how to take down that building. There's a lot of trash piled up around that property. We were gonna be able to pay for a lot of that work through the library project, but we lost that funding when the library project went down. So we're gonna have to try to make this amount work.
George, what line are we on?
Yeah, that's under, it's line 692. It's under the highway. And if you scroll down below the highway, you'll see
On
trash removal, hazardous waste,
page
waste
3.
disposal. Page 3. So $14,800, Becky, you think will be enough for the disposal of that building demolition?
Well, the way we're trying to do it, we're hoping, because it's not just the demolition of the building, it's the cleanup of the
Mhm.
building as well. So, I mean, the cleanup of all those
The site.
old tires and metal and all kinds of stuff that's littered around behind that building.
And that lot extends way into the back where there's a wide open space, right?
And then it closes up again. Yeah, it's over 20 acres.
Can the town offer that to AMP to put solar generation?
What do you mean offer?
Well, they're coming into town and they're looking at all this property that Coles Lumber owns, right? And they've identified all these places that they want to put solar, and we know there's going to be debate about many of those places. But we also have land that's sitting unused that potentially could be producing a lease income for us, as well as more taxable property. And I'm just wondering if, I know this is probably off topic, but I was just wondering, is there an opportunity here for us?
I did have discussions with Lodestar, similar plan. Maybe it was Lake Street before Lodestar. Yeah, it was Lake Street, about the potential of doing that. And at one point they were considering adding it to the project and helping us get a discounted rate on the cost. That has, so there's all kinds of possibilities out there. We've had a review of that property. There was a landscape architecture project done on lot 032. And I don't know, I don't really buy it, but one of the comments was they didn't believe that that property had the width to get enough sunlight on for the solar panels. which this was not this what the Energy Committee had said when they reviewed the property and used all the mapping and required shadowing implements. So it's hard to say, but if
Well,
we can get people with lots of energy to work on these projects, maybe we could pull something off.
Let me just say, I did look at the Taylor house to buy it back before the town did purchase it. And one of the reasons that I didn't buy it was because the Casutas had stripped all the soil off that land in the back, sold it off to house lots. So it's probably a pretty good place for a solar farm since it doesn't have any soil on it. You can't really support much vegetation except looks like Cape Cod back there,
I've been back there.
Cranberries.
Yeah,
There's cranberries everywhere.
right. But that's the only plants that can support little miniature sort of bonsai pine trees and
What?
cranberries.
You don't eat those cranberries, do you? Wasn't the federal government, Air
That's-
Force had control of that area? I'd be careful.
Yeah, I know. Be careful. Exactly.
Well, anyways, to me, it's on a hilltop. It's completely open. And as you said, there's no trees that are sequestering carbon there.
Right.
So
There
it's
is-
Well, there are, but they're fewer. There are still a lot of trees there.
Those cranberries don't sequester very much carbon.
Yeah. Especially people are picking them all the time.
Yeah, anyway, it's an interesting idea.
That's everything I have for these fences.
Anybody else? Any items?
Jim, it's 9:30.
Yeah, we've nailed the agenda. We covered everything.
Wow.
And we came up with about another 8 meetings worth of agenda items.
Right.
Due in 2 meetings.
Yep.
We're good.
And have we had enough?
I have.
I make a motion that I've had enough.
Okay.
I make
I'll
a motion
second
to adjourn.
I'll second it. When,
Over 90 side.
Grove's eye.
Oh, Hemingway's gone. I guess you. All right.
AJ
I'm
wants to
used
keep
to
on
wait.
going.
I'm used to
AJ's
waiting
not
for
sure.
it.
You might want to go a little longer, huh?
That's my cue.
Moser, aye.
Walt and I.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good
Good night,
meeting.
everyone. Go
2
Celtics.
days.
Go Celtics.
See ya.
I hope they're winning.
Have a good night.
You too.